Opatola Victor joins us now from our Abuja studio to discuss the controversy over the electoral law and the recurring decimal in the Senate of the disputed pieces of legislation, beginning with the tax law and the now Electoral Act. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Welcome to Newsday.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, if a law is signed, but the text is found to be different from the one that is passed by the National Assembly, what is its legal status? Is it an act of parliament or a forged instrument?
Thank you. Any law that is assented to by the president and different from that is enacted and passed by the National Assembly is definitely a constitutional sabotage, is definitely not a law that ought to be binding on citizens. And definitely that is not the spirit and the intendment of the Nigerian Constitution. So definitely it's, when what is passed by the National Assembly is the spirit and the content of what was passed by the National Assembly is different from that which is assented to by the president or gazetted, as the case may be, then definitely it is not, it cannot be perceived as a binding law on citizens of Nigeria.
Well, it does seem we're seeing a pattern here, first with the tax law and now with the Electoral Act. In your view, do the disputes over the tax law and the electoral law suggest procedural lapses, or is it a deliberate manipulation?
Recent occurrences has shown that the National Assembly is seriously struggling with internal coherence and weak institution and weak democratic institution, because there's a trajectory here where given the tax law, look at the brouhaha, the so much issues that arose during the tax law and how the National Assembly has made effort to bury it and not address the issue as it is. So let's go to the tax law and how the National Assembly has attempted to bury it. The people, the citizens are saying that the content of what was passed by the National Assembly is different from the content gazetted by from the content that was gazetted by the clerk of National Assembly. The National Assembly comes out to say it is releasing a CTC of what it passed into law. That is an indictment indirectly saying that, okay, what we pass is different from what was gazetted. That means the fault is not ours. The fault is wherever the fault is. But something the people and those who are defending this, something that cannot be defended, what they forget is that the Gazette, as it is a special legal instrument. It's an instrument of public notice to the whole world. This means that what is gazetted is taken as a notice to the world. That means that it is what, when we look at the legal principle that, a law, when a law is made, it is only binding on ignorance of the law is not an excuse. Okay, that's a better word for it. So ignorance of the law is not an excuse, but there are exceptions. So what are these exceptions? The exception is one, a law made, validly made, must be gazetted. By gazetting, it is taken as that it has become public notice to the whole world. So nobody can come out to say it is he or she is ignorant of the law. So what now happens when what is gazetted is different from what is passed by National Assembly? Or even worse, there are two conflicting gazettes in circulation. That means that there cannot be two public notice of the same gazetted laws for the same set of gazetted laws. The liability of Nigerians cannot be said to be fixed or certain in that particular instance. So going back to your question, the various issues that has come to fore recently has clearly shown that National Assembly is seriously struggling with internal coherence, as the case may be. So going to these electoral acts now, I think Nigerians should be concerned in the sense that What Nigerians want is a mandatory provision that compels INEC to, through whatever language it wants to use, transmission, transfer, to compel INEC and its staff to transmit result or transfer result, whichever word, to the IRF portal. Maintaining the content of the present Electoral Act, maintaining the content as it is, shows that the National Assembly is gradually losing touch with what Nigerians want, or with what majority of Nigerians want. We have seen the serious issues that arose by trusting the discretion of INEC in the last election. We have seen how INEC came out to prevaricate, saying one thing in one breath, which Nigerians relied on, which parties relied on, which electorate relied on, and even those who are contestant, they relied on, breaching the legitimate expectation of practically the whole country. We have seen how INEC practically said one thing and on the day of the election did another thing entirely. This is breach of trust. So what the National Assembly is doing, apart from their own, now notorious internal incoherence, what the National Assembly is doing is that it is not learning from the lessons of the previous election. It is not learning from the betrayal of trust of citizens, the betrayal of contestants and voters in the last election, where INEC said one thing and did another thing. National Assembly is going ahead to again give INEC discretion in the matter of in the matter of transmission of election result. We have seen some persons come out from the National Assembly to try and clarify issues, but when you delineate their effort at clarification, you still have to appreciate the fact that they're just trying to obfuscate issues and confuse issues. What it all boils down to is that the National Assembly failed woefully this time around again to make mandatory the provision that compels INEC to compulsorily transmit electoral result. That is just the long and short. And all these efforts to clarify, all these efforts, it even goes further to show the internal coherence of the National Assembly as we are presently experiencing. So Nigerians should be worried. In the space of less than 2 months, serious, major, foundational incoherence has emerged from the National Assembly. Yes. Nigerians should be worried. Nigerians should make efforts to, hold their representative accountable as practically what they passed in regards to this electronic transmission of result is not, depicting what Nigerians want.
Yeah, and with this current recurring decimal of disputed laws and as a result of poor administrative clerical work, are we witnessing a fundamental breakdown of the separation of powers within the country?
Please, when we try to box it into a corner of clerical, errors, this is beyond clerical errors. This is not clerical errors. This goes to the root. Let's take the tax laws as an example. The sections that were changed, altered, as the case may be, those are foundational. Those are sections that goes to the tax liability of individuals, that goes to the tax obligations of individuals, that even goes to, major and fundamental issues in regards to the tax liability of individuals. So they are definitely not clerical. Clerical are minor issues. These instances are not clerical. There's a deliberateness to it. There's an intentional, effort, to alter these numbers of laws, specific laws across boards. So there are 4 tax laws, for instance. If it only happened in one, maybe minor thing happened in maybe the first, the Tax Administration Act, for instance. Now, yeah, we can say that's clerical, but it's across the 4 tax laws. So, this is beyond clerical. It is definitely not clerical, and it shows an endemic recurring problem that Nigerians must face. We must not allow the 3-day news cycle, to overshadow this. Nigerians must confront this issue. We must address this. If these 2 major fundamental issues came up in less than 2 months, and that is because by one way or the other, these things came up. What about other ones that have been happening that Nigerians do not know about, or that were easily swept under the carpet? If these 2 major issues can come up in less than 2 months, then it shows a pattern. It shows a pattern that must be investigated, even of previous laws that have been made, and the ones that will be made, in times to come.
Now, you've talked about the fact that the National Assembly is suffering a lack of internal coherence. So what institutional reforms would you say are necessary to end this cycle of legislative errors?
Now, what it shows, let's take the tax law for example. The Act Authentication Act lists out the procedures, so of what must be done, when and how. I'll give an example of the content of the Act Authentication Act. It says once a set of law is passed by the National Assembly, the clerk of the National Assembly certify those particular set of laws, transmit it to the president. The content that is transmitted to the president, immediately the president sees it, goes through it, likes what he sees, and is in tandem with what the National Assembly has passed and transmitted to him. The body, after then the president signs. Immediately the president signs the specific law, the specific document, the specific content that the president has sent to and signs is then certified. The clerk makes a certified true copy, and there is a specific burden on the clerk to, gazette that specific content. It does not have the discretion to alter or to change. Even if he has the discretion to alter or to change, what the Act of Authentication Act specifies is in regards to the numbering and maybe minor, obvious clerical error. And the Act of Authentication Act specifically states numbering. It didn't even give it the leverage to clarify minor errors. So that goes to the issue of regazetting that was done by that the National Assembly directed the clerk to do. The clerk does not have the powers to do that. The law is specific. The law has shown us what it wants. The spirit of the law is clear. What the National Assembly ought to do in that instance of the Tax Act is to amend those tax laws, not to sweep it under the carpet, not to try and explain it away to Nigerians as we currently have right now. So the law is, as I've explained, is clear, is the means or the process of circumventing this law or bearing some of these obvious deliberate alterations that has led to instances where the National Assembly has been, or the office of the clerk has been going outside of the stipulation of the law.
Right. Well, Opatola, Victor, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Thanks so much for the conversation.